facilities across the street. And then there's 6 sites they identified. Location 1 is west of the Clearwell here, south of Avenue N. Location 2 is just east of the main driveway. Location 3 is a little further east than that, up near the home over there on the right-hand side. And then location 4, 5, and 6 are north of Avenue N. The 2 we decided to focus on were Site 1 and Site 3. They seem to have the most promise. Site 2 was just too small. There wasn't enough room to fit the building, and it was going to take a ton of grading work. And then Site 4, 5, and 6, being located on the other side of the street, would involve either a new driveway or improvements to parts of Avenue N. So the costs associated with that work ruled those out quickly. So a little more detail, Site 1, we like it because it's on the same side as our existing facilities. It's close to our existing utilities here, like electric, water. It's a relatively level site, and it's accessible from existing access on Avenue N. And then there's little impacts to our plant operations, as well as no adjacent residences that we have to worry about. Some downsides would be that it's hidden behind the Clearwell, and back in the day, this area used to be a sledge bed for temporary use when they first built the plant. And as a part of the DBP project, they filled in that area. We're not sure how that was backfilled. They were supposed to remove the sledge before, but John doesn't remember if they did or not, and that's the records we have. So that whether or not that sledge is there will be identified by geotechnical work. You can see in the photo we have plenty of room for our large trucks the maintenance department has to access around the Clearwell, through the building, and in and out of the gate to get to Avenue N. We actually today went out with the maintenance department and they drove it, and we had staked out the building location, and they said that it was going to work for their needs. Our other site is Site 3. Again, similar to Site 1, we like it because it's on the same side as our existing facilities. It's close to our utilities. There's a gate already off Avenue N. This site is a little bit larger. It gives us some room for flexibility and has minimal impact on plant operations. The disadvantages would be that through this area during rain events, we have some flood protection that would be required to keep our investment dry. The dashed lines on the figure show kind of the boundary of that dry creek bed, drainage wash, whatever you want to call it. Some of the residences are located just off the photo here. So if we get in there with equipment or loud tools, it could be a disturbance to those neighbors. And then there is going to be quite a bit of grading needed to reshape the site, both involved with flood protection and just general slope of that site. And then there would be some potential interference with the expansion of our septic system, which serves this building and our other avenues. Go ahead.
Oh, can you go back? This is Director Donato. I'd be very concerned about that site for a couple of reasons. When you do the grading, I don't care how much water you put, the dust control is going to be horrendous when the wind blows from off that hill right there, and then the neighbors, there's one or two neighbors down the road there, and you're correct about the noise level. I don't know. I just I would really try to work it out with the other side, because that can really cause some issues with the neighbors.
Yeah, thanks, Director Donato. So we had very similar concerns, which is why we and AV Engineering came to the conclusion that Site 1 is the better site for us. It has more advantages and relatively insignificant disadvantages compared to everything else. Site 3, like the nearby residences, would affect the cost and long-term operation if we were to go there. So AV engineering staff and the Water Projects Committee recommend we provide a consensus to support the selection of Site 1. If we get that tonight, we'll tell AV engineering to proceed, and they'll complete the rest of their design activities, targeting a completion date of March or April of next year.
Okay, yeah, this is informational only at this time. There's no more order in.
No order.
Okay, is there any further questions or comments?
I think we're just looking for a head nod on Site 1 to make sure nobody has any objections to that.
I agree.
All right.
Yeah.
It appears going in the right direction.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you much.
Yeah.
Okay, that brings us down to the next item. Number 9, General Manager. Matt, we'll turn it over to you.
So good evening. So before we get to my slide, Peter Thompson's going to go through a couple slides to kind of recap the state water contractor meetings during the month of October that he attended. We went through this information with the State Water Project Committee about 2 weeks ago. So Pete's going to go through the next couple slides.
All right. Good evening, directors, President Lane. I'll just get through these and pretty quick, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask. So the October State Water Contractor meeting, they had one of their experts come in and talk about the Delta Smelt hatchery operations and how DWR is working to make it more effective and cost a lot less. So if any of you have ever taken the Delta tour through the Water Education Foundation, you've probably toured the Delta Smelt fish hatchery, and it's a highly scientific building. The smelt are kept in in stainless steel tubs and taken care of very carefully. But they've been able to determine that they can actually grow these out in ponds in the Delta, and that would be a much more cost-effective, potentially much more effective way to grow smelt and meet our permit requirements. There is a video on the next slide that President Lane thought would be informative for the board, and we'll play that when we get through this one. They also talked about another money-saving project called the South Delta Permanent Gates Project. They're looking every so often, they have to put in temporary rock barriers in the Delta to keep water levels up and salinity back to protect farming in the Delta. This would put in a permanent gate structure that they could easily put down and move or open and close. And that would be much more effective and less costly in the long run than going out and putting in the rock barriers, taking multiple weeks to do that and taking multiple weeks to remove those rock barriers. So they're going to keep updating us on that project. And right now they're actively seeking funds from our federal partners to assist with that project. We did get some positive news on our operations permits. So there's a lot of funds have gone into proving out science with fish and the flows in the Delta. And those got incorporated in our new permits. So it will actually make us more nimble and more able to pump water out of the Delta in future years. So that should be good news in terms of water supply and increased table A coming out of the Delta. At the October meeting, I also did a presentation about Avek, and that was well received. There was a lot of feedback from multiple different state water contractors expressing their being impressed with the projects that Avek has already done, the board has supported, the projects that are ongoing, and the things that are being considered in the future, like SNP Phase 2. We also had a separate workshop with DWR. DWR's had a lot of turnover in their upper management just due to retirements. And so they wanted to make sure that DWR executive level staff were on the same page as the state water contractors. So we tackled issues of affordability, energy, storage, subsidence, voluntary agreements, and federal relations. And it was a good workshop, and they seemed very committed to making sure that moving forward, the project is effective and as affordable as possible, and that we do a much better job of bringing in our federal partners to pay their fair share.
You know, that federal funding may be very slow in coming, it may not at all, because there's gonna be a different emphasis than what there has been, so counting on the federal funds is very iffy.
Oh, thank you, President Lane. I should clarify, when I say federal partners, I mean the Central Valley Project. They're supposed to pay a good portion of the activities that go on in the Delta, and they haven't in the past, but DWR is going to try to make sure that the Central Valley Project pays their fair share, which is different than requesting grant funds from the feds. We also had a Class 8 meeting. So all the East Branch contractors get together quarterly to discuss what's important. One of those was East Branch expansion discussion. So the focus has shifted to expanding the conveyance capacity between the Tehachapi Afterbay and Parablossom pumping plant to allow for more banking opportunities on that section, which is really the Antelope Valley and Avek service area. So that's a lot of focus is honing in on the Antelope Valley as a key spot for banking state water project water. Along with that was storage needs, assessing where banking could occur, whether in Central Valley, Antelope Valley, or south near Victorville. And then they did a presentation on subsidence, and we're going to be coming back to the State Water Project Committee with a presentation on subsidence, and we can
Be using Antelope Valley for a storage facility as far as the state or individual water agencies.
So it is obvious to a lot of state water contractors that the Antelope Valley is an ideal spot to park water. I have pushed back against the idea of DWR doing a project up here and expressed that Avek has projects that they're engaged in, High Desert, potentially a High Desert 2. And also we recently have an MOU with Willow Springs. So I've just kind of tried to press pause on too much excitement on DWR moving forward with any potential projects.
That's good.
Yeah. So, all right. And that subsidence presentation will be coming to the State Water Project Committee and potentially to the board in a future meeting. So the next slide is a video. And before we press play, well, may not be able to hear it over online.
We're here today to start our second deployment of our pilot propagation study, where we are putting Delta smelt out on the islands in our cages, and we're working with UC Davis, our partners with USGS, Department of Water Resources, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and hopes to study Delta smelt and how best to culture them out in more naturalistic settings.
The Delta smelt are listed as endangered both state and federally. We hope by using these impoundments to be able to produce enough fish, and we will have like sustainable numbers.
Currently, they're trying to supplement the species by taking hatchery fish and introducing them into the wild. If the Bolden Islands study is successful, it can be used to inform our partner agencies in their efforts to culture Delta smelt. Right now, all the cultured fish are in tanks. There are sterile environments. Everything's very controlled. The technical expertise you need to man and operate them, plus the equipment, is really intensive and actually quite expensive.
So that's why we hope to be able to reduce the manpower to raise these fish by using more natural settings like the impoundments.
Using ponds is a low cost and a very effective way of culturing Delta smelt in much larger capacity. You can scale those up much more quickly, much easier than you could these tanks. We've already had a primary deployment in November, and then we ended it in January. They did very well. They survived. They had some pretty good growth, a lot of great things. So I think we've already demonstrated this is successful. And our plans are to try to leverage that success, look at other islands and see if those impoundments might be useful, as well as other impoundment designs. We have a lot of ideas of what we can do for this.
I'm proud to be part of a research project that is meaningful and that has also like very direct consequences for a fish population.
That's a pretty exciting thing to try to support Delta smelt out here in the wild. It's dynamic. They get day-night activity. It gets cold at night. It gets warm during the day. You have the winds, everything for them to eat naturally. If we want to use Delta smelt in the wild from the hatchery, we've got to give them all the tools for them to thrive and do well. And this is the way to do it.
All right, so kind of nice. You don't normally hear about projects being undertaken to reduce costs, but that is one that could certainly reduce our permitting costs for Delta smelt.
Okay, well, thank you. Matt, do you have anything to add?
Actually, Pete has one more slide.
Okay, let's continue.
Just real quick, the question has come up before when you're up in Sacramento, what do you talk about? And so I wanted to bring back a couple of things that we have talked about. State water contractor dues policy. We wanted that to be allocation based versus delivery based. As you know, that Avek's going to take advantage of high delivery years, and that if it's delivery based, our costs for dues go up. I'm happy to report that they decided to go allocations based, so we'll have a predictable amount of dues, and it won't go up during those high years when we are taking a whole lot of water to our water banks. So that's good news there. They did hire federal lobbyists. So one of the things that I've been pushing from the board seat is that representation doesn't just flow to the larger contractors, Met and Kern County, and that they set up a forum for all the state water contractors to engage with the federal lobbyists to make sure that our projects are being brought up as well, like a SNP phase 2 project. Other things that I've communicated directly to DWR is the need to continue to focus on equity in our federal partnerships or the Central Valley Project, make sure that they're paying their bills. That's going to be really important with subsidence. Continue to press on them about making sure that they're putting in the right efforts to keep the project affordable through a variety of different areas. And then also happy to let you know that the AV State Water Contractors provided a tour to the Deputy Director of State Water Project and gave him a tour of Avek, Palmdale Water District, and the Larock Creek Irrigation District, and just let them know how we use the State Water Project water out here. So that was also very well received and opened up a good avenue for our agencies to talk to that Deputy Director. And that concludes my report.
All right. Thank you, Pete. Good job.
From what I hear, there's a possibility on the federal portion of it, there may be some major changes. So it'll be interesting, what happens in this upcoming year.
Yep, understood.
All right.
Matt,
yeah, I've got one more slide to go through. Just talk about some upcoming events that we have planned and meetings. So next week we have the Water Master Advisory Committee. That's on Wednesday, the 20th at 10 a.m. By Zoom, or it's in person at Quartz Hill Water District. Mentioned before, we've finished our annual audit for the agency. So we're scheduled to present a draft of the financial audit to the Finance Committee next Thursday. And then if that all goes well, we'll present to the full board at our next regular meeting on the 26th. Got the Thanksgiving holiday coming up on 28th and 29th. We also have Aqua Conference in Desert Springs scheduled for the first week of December. I know there's at least 2 directors planning to attend, as well as myself. Then we have the special Antelope Valley Water Master meeting scheduled for December 10th at 10 a.m. here at AVAC or on Zoom. And then the Antelope Valley Edge holiday breakfast on December 18th. So
great. Well, thank you for the
that's all we have. Yep. Any questions, comments?
Okay, there's no questions, we'll move on to, director's reports. Move on to attorney reports.
Nothing to report.
Request for future agenda items. There's no,
No reason
Closed
for a
session.
closed session this evening.
okay, that brings us down to, our adjournment to November 26, 2024, 5:30, PM. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. President, as Director Miller moves to adjourn.
We have a motion by Director Miller,
All second.
second by Director Mercy. Madam Secretary?
Barry Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes. We're adjourned. Everybody have a good evening. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
It's over. Hold on.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Yeah, Madam Secretary, if we could have a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. President. Division 7, Gary Van Dam.
Here.
Division 6, Audrey Miller.
Here.
Division 5, Robert Paris.
Here.
Division 2, Keith Dias.
Here.
Division 1, Drew Mercy.
Here.
Division 3, Frank Donato.
Here.
Division 4, George Lane.
Here.
General Manager Newtson.
Here.
General Counsel Tilden Kim.
Here.
And Holly Hughes present.
Yeah, thank you. We'll move on to item number 4, voluntary public roll call. Those that may be listening in and unable to attend, we always like to hear who's with us. We'll just take a moment if you can identify yourself and whoever's on.
White Fence 3, Jack Cephas. Good evening.
Hey, welcome as usual, Jack. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on to item number 5, public comments, period open to the public. So if an item is not elsewhere on the agenda, now's the time to address the board. We'd love to hear from any comments the public may have. I think it's going to be a short meeting. Item number 6, adoption of agenda. Item 6A1, adopt the agenda. November 12th, 2024. The board order would be in order.
Mr. President, this is Rob. I move we adopt the agenda.
I'll
Hey,
second.
welcome.
How are you?
I'm doing well. You cut that pretty short. Okay, we have a motion with Director Paris. We have a second. Director Mercy. Okay, Madam Secretary.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris.
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes. Motion carried. We'll move on to item number 7, consent calendar. We have 2 items. Approve minutes of October 16th and approve a resolution R24 annexation county lighting maintenance district at 7A1. If there's, do we have a motion? Director Mercy?
Second.
Wait a second. Okay. If there's no further questions or comments, Madam Secretary,
That second was Gary Van Dam, or was it?
who was the second?
Yes.
Gary.
Thank you. Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris.
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes, motion carried. Moving right along to item number 8, the Finance Committee. Our chairman of that Director Donato. Frank, we'll turn that over to you.
Yes, good evening. The Finance Committee met last week on this November 7th, and item number 1 is 881, consider possible action to accept and file the check registry list for the period of October 17th, 2024 through October 30th, 2024, and our general manager will give us an overview on that.
All right, thank you, Director Donato, and good evening, board. So included in your board packet, beginning on page 22, is the checklist that Director Donato mentioned. Went through this in detail with the Finance Committee last week, but I wanted to point out just a couple of items. Item number 1 on the checklist is a payment to Department of Water Resources. This is their monthly variable charges for the month of September. A little over $1.9 million. And this was to physically move about 9,600 acre feet during the month of September to the Antelope Valley. So most of that, as you know, was banked at the Westside Water Bank. Some was used directly through our treatment process. And we'll see the month of October variable invoice go down significantly because we did stop banking at the Westside Water Bank to hold about 25,000 acre feet in San Luis for carryover into 2025. Also on the first page, item number 16 is our annual membership dues to Aqua or ACWA, $27,150. That was approved as part of our budget and the membership list. So there's a lot of benefits with Aqua. As you know, the big one is all of our liability insurance for the agency is through Aqua, JPIA, and you need to be a member of Aqua to qualify for that insurance program. We also, another big benefit is our health insurance program is through Aqua, JPIA, or Aqua. And then moving on to the second page, page 23, item number 19 is our annual membership dues to CSDA, also known as California Special District Association. I was not at the finance or the finance committee, but there are some questions on this, the benefits of this membership. So first question was, what has been the historical cost for this? So the dues for this year went up 5% from the previous year. Last couple of years have been in the mid 8,000 to 9,200 a year. So this year it's $9,785. Like I said, went up 5%. You may remember CSDA came and gave a presentation on the class investment pool option for the agency. CSDA also provides ongoing training and education for both board members and management staff. I know several board members have taken advantage of that in prior years, and I've been to several of their training programs for general managers in the past. So those are just a couple of the benefits and the historical cost on that.
Matt, are there different levels of membership?
So the membership fees are based on annual revenue for the agency. It's all public agency or special districts, but your membership dues are based on annual revenue. Or maybe, is it revenue, Teresa, or operating expense? Operating revenue.
And they're all the same for everyone based upon that formula?
Correct. Yep. Yeah, it's a sliding scale based on operating revenue.
Yeah. You know, that said, I'm sure they're world organization, but almost $10,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah. So this was also approved as part of our budget expense and membership list. So maybe next, I say we continue with it for this year, and maybe next year we look at that when we approve the membership list and budget.
Need to look at it. I mean, it's not a big deal. That adds about 25 cents an acre foot to our water. If we relate everything back to benefit interracial.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Hopefully that answered the questions brought up by finance. Then everything else was pretty straightforward, but we're happy to answer any questions the board may have on the remaining items.
Is there any questions or comments from the board?
All right. Thank you.
If not, okay.
Director Donato, I'll go ahead and move on board order 8A1 that we approve the check registry.
Okay, we've got a motion by Director Donato. Do we have a second?
Director Miller, second.
Director Miller. There's no further questions or comments, Madam Secretary?
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris.
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes, motion carried. Yeah, thank you.
Yep,
Good
thank
report.
you.
Okay, that brings us to 8A2. Consideration of possible action to approve a purchase order with Hatch for the purchase of 62 trimeters, controllers for all the AVAC sites, and not to exceed the amount of $188,000, $66.12. And our operations manager, John Bozigan, will give us an overview on that.
Thank you, Director Donato. Good evening. Let's see. We have one slide. There we go. So on page 28 of your agenda, there's a staff report. Just to kind of sum it up, we have instruments called turbidimeters at all of our treatment plants, and they measure the clarity of the water. And there is MCL with the health department that you have to meet certain numbers, to be in compliance. So these are pretty critical. Each filter has a turbidimeter. The process throughout the plant has turbidimeters. We purchased these in 2008 as part of the DBP project. Hawk does not support these anymore, so you can't get spare parts. And we were talking to the finance committee, when we have electrical storms, a lot of times you'll get a power surge. It'll burn out a circuit board. And, it's okay. We had plenty of spare parts. Now we don't have spare parts and we can't get them. So the only option is to replace the controllers. And on the screen, this unit is the actual meter where the water flows through. This is the controller. This is like the brain, the computer that controls it and gives us our data. So these all have to be replaced. Hawk, we standardize everything, so we'd like to go back with Hawk since we're going to keep the meter itself. And they're expensive, but they should be supported for the next 20 years, which is the good news. So to replace all of them, Fort Sill alone has 35 of these meters, our biggest plant. But to replace all of them at all of the treatment plants would be $188,066.12. So we recommend that. Staff recommends it, and happy to answer any questions.
How come, John, we have to replace all of them? How come we just can't replace the bad ones?
Well, that was a question that was asked at finance. We could buy maybe half a dozen or a dozen and keep them on the shelf. The problem is, let's say in the summer you have an electrical storm and it takes out 5 or 6 turbidimeters at the Fort Sill plant. Now you have to take those filters offline. You can't run those filters without a turbidimeter because you can't report. So if we had a bunch go out and it restricted the amount of water we could run through the plant, that could be a problem. So it's better, I think, as operations manager, it's just better to start fresh, know that we're not going to have any problems supplying the water, supplying the demand.
So the new controllers don't have the electrical problem?
No, they could still have the problem, but the good news is Hawk makes spare parts for these. So we can have spare parts on the shelves, circuit boards, whatever we need. You know, it's like anything. They support it for so long and then they force you to replace it. Yeah,
That's a good question, Gary. I mean, that's kind of a push, which is right, which is what we should do.
Right.
Good question.
Well, it kind of makes you wonder if we should go back with them, being that they're kind of holding us, you know, hostage for parts.
well, I think
Isn't
if,
there another?
oh yeah, you
company that
could
would do
go with Rosemount. They make turbidimeters. The problem with that would be you're going to run into the same thing. They support them only for so long. And if you look at the screen, if you change, what you're going to have to do is not only get Rosemount controllers, but you're going to have to get Rosemount turbidimeters. So the price would be quite a bit more. Yeah. Yeah, between a rock and a hard place, no doubt. But we have to meet regulations and we have to make sure we can meet demand.
John, if we get the new ones, you know, we save the old ones. If we had problems with the new ones, if there's an electrical storm, could we use the old ones or not? So
No, I think I think as long as we take the old ones out, they're working. I think we could use those at all the plants if we had an emergency.
right?
Yeah, I think we could.
That's a good idea, George.
But again, it's a very good question you had. Hard to make a decision.
Right. Well, you just, you know, these companies, and they all seem to do it. They only make parts for so long and then they go away. Kind of makes you wonder if we should order some parts before.
Well, what we'll do is order the parts that typically will go out. A circuit board, some different things. So we'll have those in stock. But let's say we had some massive problem. You know, George's idea is correct. We could take these old ones that are being stored off the shelf in an emergency. We could get by.
Right. Okay. Okay. What's the board's pleasure?
Well, I'll make a motion. We accept 8A2 for the amount of $188,066.12.
Do we have a second?
Second. This is Keith.
Keith has seconded that motion.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Is there any further questions or comments? If not, Madam Secretary, if we could have a roll call.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes, yeah, motion carried. Thank you,
Well,
John.
here, next board order. This one is another one between the rock and a hard place. This is 8A3, possible consideration to approve a purchase order with Carrier for purchase of a second redundant chiller for Operations Center Administration 2 building and not to exceed $153,845. And John will explain that.
Okay, thank you again. All right, so you can see the picture up on the screen. When this building was built, there was not a second chiller added to the building, and AV Engineering added this design to add a secondary chiller. As you can see in the background, there's two smaller chillers. Those are for the old admin building next door. This large 70-ton unit is for the new building. And at the time, Cal City Construction, who built this building, they submitted a price to supply a second chiller for this building. You should always have redundancy. As we know, last summer, this chiller went out, and we had portable swamp coolers in this building to keep it cool, and it didn't do a great job, but it made it tolerable, although I think the noise was driving everybody crazy. So anyway, Cal City Construction wanted, I believe, about $350,000 to supply the second chiller, which tells me they didn't really want to do it. So the board elected at the time, let's wait, let's get Cal City Construction out of here when they're done, and we will just address this later. So they did put in the connections right here, the water connections. They did put in the underground conduit. So really what needs to be done is the second chiller needs to be installed on this pad, connected by a mechanical contractor, wire needs to be pulled to the main electrical room and connected, and then we would have a secondary chiller. Also, Johnson Controls would have to come in and program it because all of these, this HVAC in this building is all programmed. So they would have to program the chiller to work with the existing one. And that would probably be an additional, I'm thinking $25,000, $30,000 to have that done. But the price for a brand new chiller delivered, tax, delivery, etc., is $153,845. And that would come with, I believe it comes with a 5-year warranty, but I'd have to double check that. So we do recommend getting that, finally installing it on this area that's ready for it. Be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, John, when that old chiller went, or the new old chiller went out, was it under warranty?
No, it was out of warranty, and by I think a year.
Yeah.
And it was about $32,000 to fix it.
So it also had a 5-year warranty on it,
Yeah, I believe it came with a 5-year warranty.
and it went out at year 6.
Yeah, coincidence, I'm sure. No, it was weird. It was the main compressor. There's 5 compressors in that chiller, and the main one, for some reason, just blew up.
Are we sure we want to go with the same chiller company
Well,
when that happened?
I think it was the fluke. Carrier is the Cadillac. You have York, you have Carrier. I think getting the same chiller so they work well together, so the programming will work, I think is probably a good idea.
I'd agree with that, except for 6 years is not very long for on some of these.
Right. Well, these two in the back were replaced, if you remember Clark from C&D Refrigeration.
Right.
These are Carrier units, and they were replaced, probably 12 years ago, and they've been pretty much trouble-free.
Yeah. What was the problem with that chiller when it went down at year 6?
Oh, the main compressor shorted out, and it took a lot of the wiring with it.
Okay, what's the board's pleasure?
I move.
Rob, I move approval of board order 883.
This is Donato, I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Motion by Director Ferris, second by Director Donato. There's no further questions or comments. Madam Secretary?
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Albert Paris,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes, motion carried. Hey, John, good explanation, but if you notice, there's a tendency whenever you're up here, you cost us money, and Teresa makes us money.
I know. Let's see, we balance each other.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John.
Oh, okay, Director Donato, does that finish your report?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to Water Projects Committee, and Director Miller is chairman of that committee. So turn that over to Director Miller.
Okay, 8B1 is a consideration and possible action on a crossing agreement, which Justin will go into more detail.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you, Director Miller. Good evening, President Lane, members of the board. As Director Miller stated, we've got a crossing agreement for consideration of the board tonight. The Water Projects Committee met last Wednesday and discussed this item in detail. And you'll see there's a private company with an alphanumeric naming convention there, 64NB8ME. I've learned that the 8ME stands for 8-minute energy, so at least got clarity on that. I'm not sure what the other two are, but private company developing a solar facility out near the community of Boron. And excuse me, let me grab my notes here real quick. This is called the Aratina Solar Project. It's a 530 megawatt generating facility located on about 2,300 acres of privately owned land near the community of Boron. You can see some parts of the Avek distribution system shown on the map here. The light blue lines indicate our potable water pipelines. And going from our Mojave Tank Farm area towards the east, this is what we call our north feeder. Goes off to California City, but also continues out towards the community of Boron. And as you're aware, we will water through the Boron CSD system to pump water up to the Air Force Research Lab or rocket site for Edwards Air Force Base. So the solar project is located on both sides of this feeder out here. So they've got two parcels that go on either side. And because of that, they need to cross our pipeline with some electrical wire and fiber optic cable. So I'm going to zoom in on that yellow box just to get a little bit closer. So zooming in on the box now, we have another yellow box. This is the location roughly of the area that they want to cross. They're going to have facilities located on this parcel here on the east side. They also have some facilities located over here on the west side. So they'll be bringing their electrical lines to tie those two facilities together and need to cross under our pipeline in this small box here. So that's about 412 square feet. It is moving forward and zooming in even further. This is an exhibit out of the crossing agreement itself. But the crossing is within Boron Avenue, which is a public road. So we don't own the property. We don't have an easement over the property here. This is within a public right-of-way. Typically, when utilities want to cross other utilities in public right-of-way, they don't come to us for an express approval of that crossing. They'll call in a dig alert, and then we try to monitor their activities, but there's no agreement necessarily. In this case, these folks came to us to get our express written consent, essentially, to these crossing agreements. And we discussed this with attorney Jim Markman, as well as his counterpart, Bruce Galloway, in their office about doing this. And their strong recommendation was if they're going to offer us the protections that we get within this crossing agreement, then we should accept those. And we've got some details here, but the crossings will comply with our standard detail for crossing. So they'll be underneath our pipeline, a minimum of 24 inches. A question that came up at the committee was whether these electrical lines and fiber optic cable is going to be within a carrier conduit to facilitate future replacement without having to excavate under our pipeline. And we did confirm that that is the plan, to have them in that conduit carrier. So good news there. Our pipeline is a PVC, 10-inch PVC pipeline in this area. So we have no concerns about any kind of stray current being induced from the electrical lines as well. And as I mentioned, this is about 412 square foot area. Getting into some of the key provisions of the agreement, this would be for a 60-year term. There is a termination clause in there. So if it looks like their facilities are abandoned and we want to terminate the agreement, we can provide them notice that we believe their facilities are no longer in use, and we can abandon it that way if that is the case. They are required to provide us with a 7-day notice prior to any crossing work done in this area. So we have plenty of time to get out there and inspect and ensure that the work that they're doing is in compliance with this agreement. The company will indemnify AVEC, but that is not a reciprocal requirement. So we won't be doing any indemnification of the company. They will be naming AVEC as an additional insured on their general liability policy. And then they're liable for any damage to our facilities during the construction or operation of their solar project. So kind of consistent with other easement fees that we've charged in the past on a per square foot basis. We've got a signing fee to AVEC from the company of $5,000, which is more than enough to cover staff and legal counsel time in reviewing and commenting, putting this agreement together. So yeah, staff, the Water Projects Committee, and legal counsel all feel like this is a good thing for us. It ensures quite a few protections for AVEC in this, and thus our recommendation would be that the board would authorize the execution of the crossing agreement for this project. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Just looking at that board order, and I'm not going to try to repeat the name right there, but in the top, approve a power line agreement with ARATINA, two different names. What's the significance?
Aratina is the name of the solar project, not the name of the company. The companies are those two LLCs, but their project name is Aratina Solar Project 2.0, I believe is the full name.
Okay. So we need it with the second one.
Yeah, the crossing agreement will be between Avek and these companies here. The 864 NB 8ME and 45 MG 8ME LLCs.
Somebody was dreaming. Okay.
Mr. President, I'll move on 8B1 with everything Justin just said with the names.
A motion by Director Miller.
Well, second.
And second by Director Mercy. If there's no further questions or comments, Madam Secretary?
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris.
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes, motion carried.
Okay, so we have also 8B2. Justin, you're handling that one?
I will,
That's
yes.
on the professional services agreement with CSI Services.
Yes, thank you. I'll jump right into the presentation here. The board may recall that back in mid-October, we awarded a construction contract to Cal Sierra Construction in the amount of around $1.9 million. And that was for the recoding and structural rehabilitation work of the Leona Valley tank. And if you recall, that tank's been in service for close to 50 years. It's never been recoded or structurally repaired in any way. And so we're moving down that process. We've got the contractor on board. We're set to have a kickoff meeting here this week, I believe. But going along with that, obviously, we'll have some construction management services. Avek staff, in order to keep overall project costs down, we will be managing the day-to-day construction activities of the project and making sure that, watching what they're doing out on the site, processing all their progress payments, doing all the typical construction management things that a construction manager would do. However, with this tank, there are portions of the project that do require specialized inspection services. So the coding application is one, and then as well as the structural analysis of some of the structural components of the tank that are unknown at this time also require specialized services. So with that, we prepared a request for proposals. We sent that out to several inspection companies and advertised that publicly on our website. We got one response to that. That response was from a company called CSI Services. Their proposal amount was $82,850. And that price is a time and materials based price. And it's based on the number of site visits that was identified within the RFP. And so we did our best guess at how often we think they would need to come to the site, how many site visits they'd need, and what work they would need to do. And we tried to estimate sort of a worst case scenario so that we knew we weren't getting a price that we would have to come back to the board later and ask for an adjustment. But these costs would be billed on an actual time and materials basis, and the work and their visits to the site would be directed by AVAC staff on an as-needed basis throughout the course of construction, so we can very carefully manage the amount of time and effort that they spend on this project. Being that we only got one proposal, we were trying to guess, is this a reasonable dollar amount? Prior to us releasing this RFP, we expected this to be in about the 5% range, so it's a little bit under what we had expected. So we do think this is a fair value for the range of services that they'll be providing on this project. So we looked into the company. They have previously worked for AVEC before when we did the recoding of Clearwell 2 here at the Port Water Treatment Plant. But they've been in business since 2004. They're based out of Santa Clarita. They specialize in this type of work, and they've come highly recommended from multiple sources. You can see a list of names on there, a lot that you're probably familiar with. Santa Clarita Valley Water Agency, Eastern Municipal Water District, Irvine Ranch, San Diego County Water Authority. So they're well qualified for this work and highly regarded within the industry. And with that, the Water Projects Committee and staff would recommend that the board authorize execution of a professional services agreement with CSI Services in their not to exceed proposal amount of $82,850. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, Justin, I had a question.
Mhm.
Any warranty on that work?
On the tank work from the contractor, yes, there is a 3-year warranty, I believe, on that work, and they'll be doing a 1 year and a 35-month inspection on that to make sure that it's holding up. Yeah, this is the professional services for the inspection. The contractor that we already awarded will hold the warranty.
And that'll be for 36 months?
Yes.
3 years?
Okay. Mr. Miller, do you have a recommendation?
I will make a motion that we approve this, and that's item 8B2.
Okay, we have a motion by Director Miller. We have a second.
I'll second. This is Director Donato.
Director Donato, we have a second. If there's no further questions or comments, Madam Secretary, if we get a roll call.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Harris,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes, motion carried.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Good job.
Oops.
The next item is 8B3, the recoding, the contract for the chemical tank recoding project that Joe's gonna talk about.
Yes.
Welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Director Miller. Good evening, Board. So today we're going to talk about the consideration and possible action on the chemical tank recoding project, which we're looking to award in the low bid amount to FD Thomas for $74,850. The project was placed out to public bid in mid-September. It includes recoding of 9 existing chemical tanks, 6 of which you can see in the photo are located here at a Quartz Hill water treatment plant, and then 3 are at our east side plant. The tanks range in ages from 17 to 47 years, and then some of them have been recoded by staff and others have not. So ultimately, we had 3 contractors attend the mandatory pre-bid meeting, but only 2 sent in bids. The bids were very close, one from FD Thomas for $74,850 and the other from Cal Sierra, who is doing the Ona Valley job, but their bid was a little bit higher. So FD Thomas holds a current and active Class A general engineering and a C33 license. We contacted multiple references and they all had positive comments about FD Thomas. With that, our recommendation and the Water Projects Committee's recommendation is to award a contract in the not to exceed amount of $74,850 for the chemical tank recoding.
Joe, I had a question.
Mm-hmm.
FD Thomas, have we ever used them before?
We have not. They're a nationwide, or if not worldwide company. They're a rather large contractor.
Okay. How long have they been around?
I don't have an answer to that question, but I know I worked with them 5 years ago.
Okay.
But they've been around much longer than that.
Did we need we're doing 8 tanks total?
9 tanks.
9?
Mm-hmm.
All those needed to be done at one time?
It keeps them consistent. They're in various stages of failure. The ones from, I believe it was DBP, they were installed in 2007 or 8 is the newest ones. They haven't been recoded since.
For how many years?
That'd be 17 roughly.
How long usually does a coating last?
25 years. So we're approaching that limit here pretty quick.
Can we go back a slide to show the tank?
Sure.
A lot of this Director Donato, there was a major change in the pigment of the tanks probably about 20 years ago from the EPA that took out a component that would have made these tanks not be reserviced for a lot longer. Is that correct? I think John would probably remember that. So these things have to be updated a lot more than they used to be.
Yeah, so are you worried about like hazardous materials in the coating?
Ms. Matt, so I think what Director Donato's saying is, you know, the coating standards changed a number of years ago and they removed lead from the coatings, and older coatings that included lead had a longer life expectancy, but the newer coatings don't have that long life. Is that what you're referring to, Director Donato?
Yes, that's it.
Yep.
Okay, we have a presentation and we have a recommendation on that.
The committee recommends that we move forward. So I'll make a motion that we approve 8B3 for the coating of the painting of the chemical tank recoating project.
Okay, so we have a motion, 8B3, $74,850 for FD, Thomas. If there's no further comments or discussion, Madam Secretary?
Mr. President, we need a second. This is Rob. I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Rob.
You're welcome.
Okay. Okay, now, Madam Secretary.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller, Robert Parrish.
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Stu Mercy,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes, the motion carried. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, good presentation.
Okay, we're moving on to 8B4. We were kept really busy last week at our committee meeting. So Joe's gonna talk about 8B4.
Yeah, so 8B4 is the consideration and possible action on a professional service agreement for Pure Technologies regarding the West Feeder condition assessment. And that's in the amount of, not to exceed amount of $709,000, $709,023. Some background on the project. We've had 3 major leaks on one stretch of the West Feeder along Gaskell Road between 140th Street West and 100th Street West. This section of pipe is 36 inches in diameter. The leaks have been repaired at a cost of about $421,000. And there's a clear sign with these leaks that there's an issue with this portion of the pipeline. So to determine the extent of it, we put together an RFP and got a few proposals for condition assessment on this. The method of inspection they recommended is electromagnetic. Essentially, a tool travels down the pipe, scans the pipe walls, and gets a video of the inside. They use all this information that they collect to determine areas of wall loss and corrosion in the pipe, and then determine the amount of life expectancy remaining. This method will let us find the worst areas and only repair those versus doing a wholesale replacement of the entire stretch. So how does it work in the field? Well, they show up and everything's in a trailer or a covered truck because it's all computer equipment. They set up traffic control as needed since they'll be along the roadway. And then they dig down to some access points into the pipeline where they can drop the device in and then assemble it inside the pipe. So after that field report is done, they put together a paper report for us to look at. It has all kinds of information on project details, actual losses of the pipe, and a summary table with all of the locations, as well as video files tied to those locations. And then they provide dig sheets that help us find the exact location in the real world so we can go and fix it. And then they also put together a probability of failure for each pipe segment. So every 40 feet, they'll tell us how likely that piece is to break. And then they forecast the number of pipe sections that will need to be repaired each year from today to 2045. And then they also put together recommendations for future asset management. So some examples of how the results look. The bottom left is a photo of one piece of pipe, and at the bottom or the invert of the pipe, there's a small area of damage, and that's shown with that black dot. That same pipe, if you were to cut it along the crown of the pipe on the top and lay it out flat, it would give us the example in the top left, which tells you exactly how far from each joint and where on the pipe the damage occurred. And then they can correlate that to the video inspection so you can see exactly what it looks like at that time. And then the bottom right is the pipe by pipe database that they prepare, which tells you each joint, numbers them all, and then tells you any blow-offs or air valves that we have, and then highlights the damaged areas as well. So this is an example of one of those dig sheets that they will put together for us. On this one, they were actually able to identify a leak that wasn't visible from the ground. And they give you GPS coordinates for where that'll be, as well as physical measurements from the nearest appurtenance, like a gate valve or a 90-degree bend or something. So the two proposals we got, one was from Pure Technologies, who is also called Xylem, at 709.023, and then the other from PICA, which stands for Pipe Inspection Corporation, for 783.250. Pure Technologies, or Xylem, has used this technology all over the world to inspect thousands of miles of pipeline. And some of their clients include Metropolitan, Tehachapi, Cummins Water, and Wheeler Ridge.
Might just clarify that that's 709,000.
Yes, yeah, 709,000, not $709.43. Yeah, big chunk of money. So we contacted some of their clients, and they all had positive comments. If there's any questions, I can answer them now or move to a recommendation.
I had a couple questions, Joe. One is, how old is that pipe that we're repairing in there? One. Two, what is the schedule of that pipe?
So the age is roughly 50 years, a little bit less, maybe 45. Okay. And then the pipe is rated not in schedule, but in a pressure class. So where we've been having the damage, it's rated for 175 PSI. But the wall thickness is about, I believe it's 3/8 of an inch.
3/8?
Yeah.
Now, would it be, so we're not going to repair this pipe, we're just going to go in there and basically look at where the leaks could start?
Yeah, so the inspection will tell us where that 3/8 of an inch has worked its way down to only 1/8 of an inch.
Right.
And then without replacing the entire joint, we can cut the mortar off on either the outside or the inside and weld on a patch plate before it starts leaking. So we can repair what we already have rather than wholesale replace.
Was this the pipe that had the bad mortar on it, John, before that we were talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is Director Miller. I think you mentioned this is only the bid on a 4-mile section.
Correct.
Right, of the pipeline, but in that area where we have 3 breaks.
Yeah, that the breaks have kind of identified this stretch of pipe as a bad spot. We would be inspecting the entire length of 36-inch installed under this one contract. So it would be inspecting all of that.
Okay. And the leaks basically cost us $421,000.
Yeah.
Repair.
Yeah. Not counting time lost for it being out of service.
There's a question, and the committee spoke about it a little bit, and Matt talked about it earlier, but that's $709,000 for 4 miles, and it doesn't repair pipe. So is it better to go ahead and get that inspection so we know what we may have in the future, or is it better off just to use that for future repair? So that's probably worth discussion. And Matt, that's something you might want to comment on.
Yeah, so thank you, President Lane. So we discussed that internally with the staff. and then also with the committee. Our thinking is that Director Lane's right, that we could use that $700,000 to replace the full 4-mile section of pipeline. But we think it money well spent to do the inspection, know exactly where we stand with the integrity of the pipeline. And if we can get by with just doing spot repair, replacing sections of pipe that are bad, and get more useful life out of the remaining pipeline, this is probably the best approach, rather than just blindly go out there and replace 4 miles of pipeline, which will cost tens of millions.
Over 10, yeah.
Over $10 million.
Yeah, what is that number to replace 4 miles of pipeline?
I just did some quick math, but at $400 a foot, which is about what we're paying at High Desert, it's about $9 million.
Yeah.
Plus engineering and all the extras for valves and connections and everything like that.
Yep.
But that is a consideration, whether to do the work now or use that for future repairs.
That is consideration, but
So it's not really black and white, it's clear cut, but management thinks it's better to go ahead and do the inspection.
yeah. And we have tens of miles of pipeline that is getting old. So this will not only tell us what we've got out in that 4-mile section, but if the technology proves beneficial, it's something that we could look at in inspecting our other segments of pipeline throughout the agency.
And I think the committee agreed with that.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment, President?
Yes.
Mr. Director Miller. One of the things I heard tonight that I sort of heard at committee, but I heard it better, understood it better tonight, is repeat the part in the technology where they said they'll be able to forecast if they find an area of concern. It may not be concerned today, but it might be concerned 10 years from now or further down or earlier, right? Is that part of the technology that we're going to get?
Right. So they're able to determine the amount of fractions of an inch per year of wall loss. And then at a certain point, it'll go away. So they're able to give us a chart with each year, say, okay, 5 joints will break this year, 10 will break this year, etc.
So it's forecasting for us, giving us an idea, and if we find out it's really flawed bad, especially in a couple areas where it could be soil or it could be something else, we'll know. And that's the value, I think, in this testing, is to get that forecast out of it.
Yeah, the forecast will let us budget for it years in advance.
And these other companies that have used this, you got recommendations from them.
Yeah,
right?
So one I talked to was Wheeler Ridge, Maricopa. I used to do some work for them as a consultant before working for Avek. They had an inspection done. They identified a few joints that were bad, and they're in the process of replacing those now. And then actually plan to do more work with Pure Technologies in the future on other pipelines.
Yeah, so I find value in having this done, especially forecasting it out in our budget or having some idea. Maybe there's a lot of joints that are affected and we'll know exactly what we're working with, especially in that 4-mile stretch. And then in the future, if we have to do more investigation, we can in other sections of the pipe as well. So I'm in favor of this. If we're ready for a motion, I'll make a motion.
We have a motion, and I think it's a good recommendation. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Gary. Okay, there's no further questions or comments.
I had one more question. When we put that pipe in, now you're saying it's 3/8. Would it be better to do a heavier wall pipe? So it sounds like we're fighting leaks because of the wall thickness.
So it's a trade-off between cost and life. We could go with probably the cheaper alternative would be to go with a little heavier mortar coating on the outside, because that's what really protects that steel.
Right.
Our mortar right now is probably breaking down, which is causing the corrosion on that.
Yeah, that's what John was saying in that last presentation that John did, is there was the mortar, basically not the pipe, the mortar that was caused, where they grabbed it with a front end loader, John, is that correct? Or a backhoe when they put it in, cracked some of the mortar off the lining of the wall?
Yeah, a lot of pipes we've seen that happen, where they're unloading it or dropping it in the ditch. They hit it with the tractor with the loader.
So how do we take care of that? How do we cause that from happening again?
Good inspection.
Somebody from Avek being there watching it go in?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, to award a bid of $709,023 to, Pure, Technology, company. If there's no further questions or comments, Madam Secretary?
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Harris,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes, motion carried. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, moving on to 8B5. We can't get away too fast here. And this is not just Joe, this is Senior Engineer Joe Roberts that will talk to us now.
Titles don't matter to me. The last one's easy for you. There's no action on this. It's just an update for our maintenance shop building site plan design that we are working with AV Engineering on. So if you remember, the board authorized a design contract with AV Engineering. Their scope of work is to